Hey guys, welcome to What Was Mommy Thinking? My name's Crystal. I'm a full-time working mom of three amazing boys, and I live in the state of Texas with my family. You are coming at a great time because we are right in the middle, or at the beginning, or whatever you want to call it, of starting a series on freezer meal cooking. Freezer meal cooking is essentially for my family. All of my boys play sports, very active. My husband and I both work full-time, and we have food and dietary restrictions in our house which make it virtually impossible to eat out. So freezer cooking is one way that we get healthy meal, meet everybody's dietary restrictions, and don't bust the bank on all of our food. So we did phase 1. Let's get into phase 2 so we can get headed towards that first weekend of freezer meal cooking. Stick around.
I know that we can go higher if we keep our faith, if we keep our faith. Sometimes I'm like a whisper in a riot, but I grow stronger, keep believing in me.
So welcome. Happy Monday, everybody. I know that I used to do a series called Setting Yourself Up for Success on Mondays, and it was all about weekend prep and getting everything ready. Baseball kind of took over our life for weekends, and this past weekend was our last weekend of baseball, so I'm now going to take advantage of the few weekends I have between now and when football and baseball start to set myself up for success in a couple of different ways. One of those ways is to get some freezer meals put in my freezer to prepare for those busier months. If you guys missed my phase 1 for freezer meal cooking and my intro video, I will do my best to remember to link it here in the video. And it was just how, for me, because I struggle with kind of the immersion theory where you jump in and do it all at once. I struggle with that, and I have to kind of break things down into more manageable pieces just to make sure that I'm not setting myself up for frustration and disappointment as I go along. I have been doing this for a very long time. So, with that being said, one of the things that we're going to look at, you're going to need your planner or calendar or whatever it is that you use to track things. I have my holy grail of cookbooks here, and then I have my it's just a Happy Notes notebook that I'm going to show you guys. I have one section in this Happy Notes notebook that is dedicated to just kind of planning whatever it is I have going on. So this front section I use for just all kinds of financial things, and then this second section, and they're separated by these pockets, I use for whatever I'm working on right now as far as planning. So you'll see some stickers here in this pocket, and I'll show you guys why in here in a minute. Here I've got some recipes paper clipped to the pocket, and then over here I've got some freezer meal planning stuff. So let's start with phase 2. So in phase 2 of freezer meal prep, if you remember in phase 1, we've gone through all of our online, all of our cookbooks, all of our printed recipes, like I have paper clipped here, and we've made a master list. And I briefly showed this to you guys before. This was that master list that I went through, or creating your big list or whatever. Please excuse where I set my water bottle down. And once you have this, then you have to make the decision about when you're going to do it. And as I mentioned before, I like to give myself a good 4 to 6 weeks out from when I do this. And for me, that meant that I was going to be cooking in August, right? So if we look at my planner, I've got perpetual planners everywhere, right? So if we look at, this is the one I want. So if we look at the planner and we say, okay, I started working on this in July. Actually, I had started working on it in June, so somewhere around mid-August would have been perfect. However, after posting and talking to you guys, I think I'm going to split mine into 2 weekends so that I can do one, and that gives you guys an opportunity to ask questions and things before we do the second one. So as of right now, I am hoping to do a freezer meal cooking session this coming weekend, the 17th and 18th of July. So my second one will not be until either the 13th and 14th of August, or I'm sorry, the 14th and 15th of August, or the 21st and 22nd of August. It'll be one of those 2 weekends. But part of phase 2 is kind of looking at your calendar and picking a time, and then you need to plan out that weekend. And we're going to get into details of what I mean by plan that weekend out. So for those of you that are mamas, planning that weekend means that you need to account for your kids, right? Because you're going to, this requires your attention in the kitchen all day at least, if not all weekend. So here are some tips that I have for you guys. Number 1 is, if you can find a buddy, a sister, a mom, a cousin, a best friend, if you can find a buddy to do this with you, where you can say, hey, you know, especially if your kids get along and play well together, maybe her and her kids come over, or you get both of the dads to watch the kids, which is the best idea ever, and the two of you can each pick, you know, a few meals. Do them together, because first of all, it's more fun. Second of all, you can share the costs, double each of the recipes, and then split them, right? You could work on the master list together of what you think your families would like. When I lived back home in Florida, I participated in a freezer meal swap. So there was a bunch of us, and we would pick meals, and then we would go to a swap and bring 2 to 3 of our meals, and we would swap them among each other and just kind of have some time together, and it was great. A really important piece of this is also making sure that you have a good idea. If you don't have a full-blown inventory, you need to know what you have on hand, because as always, we want to use what we have on hand before we go out and purchase. So inventory, your freezer, your refrigerator, and your pantry. Once you've done that, you can set your budget for your freezer meal cooking weekend. So let's talk about that. I made my master list, and then I've got these pages in here backwards. Hang on just a second, guys. I made my master list of meals, which is this right here. And when I got done with that master list, I went through and I said, okay, if I'm going to split this into 2 weekends, I need to pick the meals that I can do in one weekend that kind of go together, right? So once I kind of boo-booed there. Once I got my master list ready, I picked my weekend. Well, I knew I had baseball up until this past weekend, and I knew that the weekend, the last weekend in July, was out of question because we have plans. So really the only weekend that I could do my first freezer meal cooking session was this coming weekend, and that's pretty short notice for me anyway. Luckily, I already have my inventory of my freezer, fridge, and my pantry because I started doing that in May, I believe. Once a month, I inventory everything. When I set my planner up for the month, I go ahead and inventory everything so that I kind of have a running idea of what I have on hand that month. It's been a tremendous help with meal planning, my grocery budget, and all of those things. And then another way to help is to be organized from the perspective of what I'm going to need to go and get. So what I have here, this is just 8.5 by 11 notes paper, is my freezer meal planning. And then I've got the store, the date, the item, and the quantity. And at the very bottom it says spent and a dollar sign. Let me see if I can zoom you guys in just a little bit there. So this is going to help me track what store I'm going to buy each of the items that I need for my freezer meal planning session. So I've got this ready to go. I've got my master list ready to go. I've planned my weekend. My kids are old enough now that I don't really have to plan childcare. When they were younger, I always made sure that my husband was going to be available to entertain them and feed them and keep track of them. And then one of the other things that really helps out is on the day that you're going to do your freezer cooking. So remember, I told you guys in my first video, I try to spread it out over 3 days if possible. I try to do Friday, Saturday, Sunday. When I do that, whatever day I'm going to do the bulk of everything, that day we eat out. So plan for that in your budget, plan it on your meal plan, put it in your planner, because the last thing that you're going to want to do is clean up more. I promise you. Promise you. So put that in your budget, put it in your plan, and you're probably sitting there going, but Crystal, we just made all of this delicious food. You have, you're not going to want to eat it. I'm sorry, but that's the cold hard truth of it is you're going to be so exhausted and so sick of looking at it. You're going to want to be able to put everything away and have that feeling of knowing you've made all of these delicious meals and that they're ready for your family, but then you're going to want to have food brought to you for that day, especially if you haven't done this before. You want to make sure you've cleared yourself of all commitments. So when you sit down and pick that weekend, if you have something minor on your calendar that you can move or switch around because it's the only weekend that you think you can do it, go ahead and free yourself from that commitment. You do not want to have to run out or go and do something or go to a birthday party or whatever it is and then come back and try and pick up where you left off, because you have to spread this stuff out and get a bunch of stuff out. You just don't want to do that. You want to make sure that whatever 2 to 3 days that you've picked, that you've cleared yourself of any obligations for that time period. So that is really it for phase 2. Phase 2 is all about the planning. It's all about picking your time, making those arrangements, freeing yourself up from any commitments that you have, having your master list, making a plan for writing out your grocery list and what meals you're going to make, planning to eat out the day that you do it, and maybe finding a buddy to do this with. That is phase 2. Included in phase 2 is making sure that you have the things that you need in your kitchen to do all of this cooking. So I thought what I would do with you guys is maybe we could take a peek in 1 or 2 of these cookbooks and see what they recommend as the list of supplies that you're going to need. And the freezer cooking basics and essentials, like this cookbook, I know you guys, I've told you guys about this cookbook so many times, but the 10 tips to getting started, these are fantastic. They say to start with meals that your family already enjoys, which is kind of a no-brainer, but some people don't think about that because they get these big cooking books and they look at the pictures and they go, oh, that looks good. But start with stuff that you know your family is going to eat. If that's spaghetti, if it's meatloaf, lasagna, whatever it is, start with those meals. If they like mac and cheese, why not start by freezing some of my amazing macaroni and cheese on page 254 so you have some on hand. Start slowly by testing recipes before making a large batch, then go big by doing a bunch of meals in a day once you know your family will like them. Make sure to label everything. This is so important. I can't tell you how many times I screwed that up when I was first freezer cooking. Otherwise, you won't remember what you've wrapped in that foil or poured into that bag, not to mention how long it's been in there. When I'm labeling, I always write the name of the dish as well as the date. It's also helpful to include instructions, such as if it needs to be thawed first or the plastic removed, plus the oven cook time and temperature. I make my stickers for each of my dishes on Microsoft Word. I just pull up a template. I print them on, I can show you guys. I print them on these Avery 8165 labels because they have really good adhesive on the back of them and they stand up to the freezer. And I print them and I just cut them. So you can buy this. I think I got this one at Walmart. I use it for shipping labels. I use it for labels on my food containers and on my freezer bags. And when you sit down and you decide what meals you're going to cook, you can sit and write the name of the meal, how to cook it, how to thaw it, and all of that, and put it on one label. And then if you're making 2 batches of it, just copy it over, and you can get several meals on one sheet of paper, print them out, cut them. They don't have to be pretty, no borders or fancy things. They just have to be functional. So number 3, be prepared before you begin. Clean your kitchen, make room in your freezer, get out your dishes, your pots, your measuring spoons, and cups. Buy the freshest ingredients and look for the longest expiration or best before dates when you grocery shop so that you get the best tasting freezer meals. That is an awesome suggestion. Get yourself a slow cooker if you don't already have one. I seem to have a bit of a slow cooker problem. Some of my favorite meals are ones I can thaw in the fridge overnight and then pour into my slow cooker in the morning and enjoy it when it's dinner time, and this makes for a double whammy of time saving. I'm going to add a third whammy to that. Get some crock pot liners so that your cleanup from this is also a breeze. To save money and the environment, consider getting some reusable containers and freezer bags if you plan on doing freezer meals often. So I do have the reusable freezer containers, and I'm going to go over that in a video with you guys about my favorite supplies for freezer meal cooking. I do not have reusable freezer bags. I use the Ziploc freezer gallon storage bags, and I do not go cheap on those. I don't buy other brands. I don't buy the store brand of freezer bags. I always get Ziploc. When you're defrosting, thaw your frozen meals for 24 hours or more in your fridge for the best results. And it says in parentheses, if you can remember. Yeah, so I've done it all of the above. I've taken it out in time for it to thaw for 24 or more hours. I've taken it out just a few hours before, and I have taken it straight from the freezer to my slow cooker where I had to wait for it to thaw some until the lid would actually go on, which is fine too. Avoid freezer burn. It's no fun, can make your food taste, well, not so great. The best way to avoid it is by removing as much air as possible when sealing your meals for freezing. I'm going to go over that with you guys on my cooking weekend. Best way to get all the air out of your bags and how to get as much air out of your 13x9 casserole dishes before you cover those and freeze those as well. Make sure to use your freezer meals within 4 to 6 months for the best flavor. I've struggled with that a couple of times, but for the most part we do get that done. And consider a freezer meal swap. Yes, if you have 5 friends who are getting together, ask each person to bring 5 of the same meal so everyone gets to take home 5 different freezer meals. It's a fun way to enjoy freezer cooking. So exactly what I was telling you guys about. If you can find friends to do this with, it makes it so much easier. So let's go over really quick the freezer cooking essentials. She has a can opener, cookie scoops for fast meatballs, cookie doughs, and muffins, cutting boards, a food processor. If you don't have a food processor but you have one of those like I do, that's just you put the veggies on there and you push down and it chops them, those are great too. Gallon size and quart size freezer bags, heavy duty aluminum foil, high-powered blender, kitchen scissors or shears, a large skillet, plastic wrap, parchment paper, permanent marker or a Sharpie, several baking containers, foil, glass, or metal dishes, measuring cups. Most people like to use 2 sets. They use 1 set for dry, 1 set for liquid, and same with measuring spoons. And it says at least 2 sets of each, measuring cups and spoons or more. Your slow cooker, several large rimmed baking sheets, several kitchen timers, and cell phones do count, several large and small mixing bowls, sharp knives, tongs, and her recommended for optional kitchen helpers are those Ziploc bag holders that you can get off of Amazon, a large 20-quart stock pot, and a food saver or vacuum sealing machine. So if you have these, they come in really handy. If you don't, it's okay. She does go into these containers here when she's talking about freezer safe bags. Again, I typically use Ziploc, and I like them because once they're frozen you can lay them flat and stack them. Mason jars, to prevent cracking, use wide mouth jars and leave a ½ inch of headspace between the top of the contents and the rim. Your food will expand as it freezes, so it'll need the extra space. I often freeze chicken stock and soups in mason jars and always check them carefully for cracks, chips, or deep scratches in the glass before using them, since cold temperatures can cause breakage even from the smallest fracture. I typically do not use glass containers for freezing. I use the food safe BPA-free plastic ones and Ziploc bags, and I'm a little scared of this happening, so I don't do it. I do have a food saver. It's a very old food saver. I think we got it probably 12 or 13 years ago. I have not used it in a very, very long time, at least 4 or 5 years. It does work beautifully when you food save your foods, but I have an issue when there's any type of liquid in it. I don't feel like I get a good enough seal, and I can get more air out of it with techniques that I use with regular Ziploc. Baking pans or dishes, metal and foil are best for freezing. You can also use ceramic or glass. Just be sure never to place a frozen glass or ceramic baking container directly into a hot oven. It could shatter. So I do use a lot of disposable pans. I know that's not necessarily the most environmentally friendly method, but I do use it, and I will continue to use it. I buy mine at Sam's Club, and I love them. So that is it for phase 2, you guys. I know that that's a lot of information, but that kind of gives you a kickstart on some of the materials and supplies that you might need, so that when you're planning your budget, you're not just planning your budget for food, and you can get going in that direction. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video before it gets ridiculously too long, and just leave it at phase 2 and give you that food for thought, and give you guys the opportunity to ask some questions and put some comments down below. Help each other out. If you guys have done freezer meals before, any tips or tricks that you have, put them in the comment section, because again, everybody's kitchen is different and everybody does things a little bit different. So my recommendation is that if you're new to freezer meal cooking, that you pick maybe 3 to 5 recipes to start with, and if it's stuff that you know your family likes, then maybe try doubling those. And if that goes really well for you, then bump it up to, 8 to 10 meals the next time. As I'm planning meals, I try to throw in a couple of convenience type things that aren't necessarily meals. And what I mean by that is I buy those huge, like logs, chubs, whatever you call them, of 90% lean ground beef at Sam's Club, because it's super cheap that way. I think it's around $3 a pound when you buy it that way, and there's usually 10 to 12 pounds in there. And I will go through and I will weigh out 2 pounds of it and go ahead and brown it in a skillet with or without onions, and then drain it. And when it's completely cooled, I put it in a Ziploc, squeeze all the air out, roll it up, and I can get 3 of those rolls inside of a second freezer bag, so that I have browned ground beef for sloppy joes, for quick spaghetti, for taco meat, for all kinds of things. Because if the meat is already cooked, browned, and drained, it's so minimal what you have to do from there on out. Or if I need browned ground beef for a casserole that I want to throw together super quick, having that browned ground beef, it takes time to do that, but it's so great to have in the freezer, and I always use it up. But I include something like that in my freezer meal as a meal to make, because it is food prep and it is frozen for future meals. But it's not a complete meal, if that makes any sense. So think along those lines about things that would help you if your family doesn't eat much red meat and you guys are big on like grilled chicken or chicken that's cut up and sauteed. You could take 5 or 6 packages of chicken breasts, cut them or grill them, chop them, and put them in the portion that your family normally eats in a meal, and let all the air out and store those in a bag. I do smoothie kits that way. There's a ton of things you can do. And then my other suggestion is, while you're looking at your master list and you're trying to kind of make it realistic for yourself, is that you give yourself some variety. If you'll notice, when I made my list, I did breakfasts and appetizers or snacks, some side dishes, some main dishes. A lot of main dishes. And then treats, like something sweet, some dessert type things. When I sit down to pull which ones of these I'm going to actually make in my freezer cooking weekend, because I'm breaking it up into 2 weekends, I want to give myself some variety. I want to do at least one from most of the categories so that I'm not wholly focused on just one area, to give myself a little bit of variety. And I don't know about anybody else, but I know for me personally, I always feel better when I've gotten a little bit from each of the categories to put in the freezer. I feel like I've got a more comprehensive menu of things to pick from. So that is all of my tips for phase 2, you guys. So phase 2, again, is all about planning your weekend. It's all about getting organized and setting yourself up for a very successful freezer cooking session that is going to benefit you for weeks, you guys. So again, if you have any questions or comments, please, please, please leave them in the comment section below. And until next time, you guys, take care of yourselves, be well, and I will see you for phase 3 very, very soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.